All right, well, thank you for the opportunity to present on waste and the circular economy. My name's Michael Cook, and I'm CEO of Community Resources Network Scotland. And we're a membership body here in Scotland. We've got about 135 members, all sorts of things from bike projects and tool libraries to furniture reuse, starter pack organisations. And our role is really two-way. One is to represent the sector, represent them to a wide range of stakeholders, and the other is to support and grow the sector. And obviously that's been never been more challenging than during this time of Covid-19. And we're supported by Zero Waste Scotland. Our vision, and really what all three speakers are speaking about at this conference, is about how we move from a linear economy to a more circular economy. How do we move from an economy where we take materials out the ground, we make them into products, we use them for a period of time, and then we lose them back into a landfill? That's really bad for the planet, both at the beginning and the end of life. There's a high carbon footprint to that. Whereas in a circular economy, we make products last for as long as possible. We reuse them, we repair them if they're broken, we recycle them. And it's a new way of working, but it is urgent that we make this transition. Rather than try and talk about everything I could talk about, I want to share some reflections actually on the back of Covid-19. I want to provoke some thought, and I'm using a metaphor. We're at a crossroads, aren't we? A lot of the ways of doing things have been forced to be stopped because of COVID, and there's really two opportunities, two different ways we can go to take that traffic light sort of road junction metaphor. How do we see recovery? An economist would see recovery as getting back to how things were before, the same level of GDP, the same level of jobs. Whereas a doctor might see recovery as getting back to being well, getting back to being healthy. And obviously, the difference comes from the question, how healthy were we before COVID hit? How healthy was our society? How healthy was our economy? And COVID-19 has had lots of impacts, and we probably won't really understand it until maybe a few years' time. But I'm just going to share some red and amber and green thoughts, taking that traffic light metaphor. Red, lots of things have stopped. And at CRNS and many others, we're really disappointed that some really good initiatives have had to be put on hold. We understand why, but it's a challenge. Deposit return scheme, circular economy bill, COP26 is an event that was due to happen in November, going back a year. There's a real risk that the climate emergency loses momentum. Our response to that loses momentum because of COVID-19 and the imperative of the public health and indeed the economic crisis. What about amber? Well, as we're stopped at this road junction and we can't move forward with some of those initiatives, is there an opportunity to rethink? Is there an opportunity maybe to reprioritize how we do things? One of the models that people are probably aware of is the waste hierarchy. And certainly some of the things we were bringing in with the circular economy bill may not have been as positive as we would have hoped, and we would have been calling for a more ambitious version of that circular economy bill. We need to really encourage activity at the top of the waste hierarchy. I go hill walking, and the lightest kit I take with me is the kit I leave behind. The purchase that has the least carbon impact is the purchase that isn't made. If we refuse to buy that thing in the first place, it's got no impact. Reusing a laptop as a laptop is much better than breaking it down and recycling it. But what if it's broken? It needs to be repaired, and that's where repair comes in. And only then should we be thinking, if all of those aren't an option, would we recycle a product, break it down into its plastic, its metals, etc., and recycle them. And only after we've recycled everything that can be recycled should we be thinking about incineration, which is where we recover some energy. And last of all, of course, is landfill. So the bottom of this waste hierarchy is waste management, whereas we should really be moving from waste management to resources management. That's where it has a better impact on the environment. And in thinking about the waste hierarchy, what we would always flag is some of the unintended consequences that happen when really well-meaning activity at the bottom of the waste hierarchy actually causes problems further up. So I'll give just a couple of examples. Landfill ban. It's a really good idea to send less stuff to landfill. It's the worst thing you can do with products. But one of the consequences that it's had is, as the landfill has become less possible, less attractive, is that instead local authorities have done the next easiest thing, which is create incineration capacity. And then we hard build into the system for the next few years incineration, when really we should be recycling those products, or better still, reusing them. Another impact is that potentially the increased tax that has been put in place on landfill by each ton of products going to landfill. Potentially it discourages reuse, because if a charity shop is bought a box of goods, of which some of them are good and useful and can have another life, and some of them are actually just rubbish, they actually might turn away that donation, because they know they're being charged for what goes out the back door into landfill at a much higher rate, and that can make them turn away donations. So we're really keen that actions like the landfill ban at the bottom don't discourage actions at the top, and we actually have a top-down approach that thinks about how we educate consumers, how we encourage reuse, how we encourage repair, and so the consumer doesn't think the most environmentally friendly thing they can do is recycle. So as we're on amber, there's an opportunity, for example, the circular economy bill, as that's been put back, to build in some really strong measures to really encourage action at the top of the waste hierarchy. We believe reuse should always be considered before recycling, that reuse should be an option at every household waste recycling site. In fact, just think about the language we use. Why is it a household waste recycling centre? Why waste when we should be seeing these as resources? And why recycling when we should be encouraging reuse? And we would call for a national reuse charter. We already have a national recycling charter, and that potentially encourages, or should encourage, recycling and greater standardization and how that's done to quality, and we support that, of course. But it should also, we should be encouraging reuse to a greater degree, and so we need a charter to stand alongside that. And maybe this pause gives us time to fit that into the circular economy bill when it does come before Parliament. What about green? There's an opportunity to define a new normal. We know that things have been so different the last few months. We found new ways of working, new ways of traveling or not traveling at all, new ways of interacting with our communities and our neighbours. So is there an opportunity to take some of that forward in a positive way? What lessons have we learned? True sustainability, it's not just about caring for the planet, but also people and place. And there's also a clear economic imperative to get the country, get jobs back and get the country trading again. So how do we keep these, what we call the 4 Ps at CRNS, how do we balance these in a way that is truly sustainable? I don't know if people have seen this model. It's pretty hot off the press. I don't know if it's actually been published yet, but I heard it and have recreated it here. It's by the Edinburgh Climate Commission. And it just looks at how there's a Covid-19 axis to it, as every good 2x2 matrix has, of non-essential and essential, and then the climate impact of positive climate implications, negative climate implications. And that results in things we want to lock in, and things we want to encourage, and behaviours we want to lock out, and others that we want to transform. As we look at recovering from COVID-19, what are the behaviours that maybe we've been forced to do because of public health, travelling less, working from home, that we want to, riding our bikes, we want to lock those things in? What are the things that we've had to keep doing, but we know they're bad for the environment? How can we transform them? And I guess it's a model for thinking about a green recovery, and how we take, there's a pregnant time at the moment. There's people willing to do things differently because we've been forced to. We're asking bigger questions as society, be it racism. These questions are being asked and looked at. And is there an opportunity to learn from that in terms of the environment and sustainability too? So I guess some of those things would be changing behaviours. The public have changed their behaviours, and there are things we didn't think were possible that we found are possible. The government had taken bold action and acted at pace. And I've been encouraged to see the UK Prime Minister flanked by scientific experts and sometimes listening to what they have to say. What would happen if these three things became normal with the climate emergency? We were willing to change our behaviours, and the government were willing to really listen to the experts. With COVID-19, experts have been saying for a long time a pandemic was likely, a flu pandemic. The only thing we didn't know was when it was going to happen. And so it was, whilst it was on the risk register very high up for our nation, it was difficult to do the investment because it might not happen soon. If we had been told in 2017 it was going to happen in early 2020, I reckon we would have been much more ready. We don't have that excuse with the climate. We know that it's happening. We know the speed it's happening. A lot of the models predict it quite accurately and are quite lining up with reality. So we really need to listen to the experts and do what they have to say. And acting with boldness and pace. You know, we say it's a climate emergency. The last few years, loads of organizations have signed up to say there is a climate emergency. But provocative question, have we acted as if it is an emergency? Or have we acted as if it's a climate would be nice to do sometime when we get around to it? A climate, let's set targets for 2045. What about actions today? You know, if my house was on fire, I wouldn't redecorate. If my house was on fire, I would either get out or tackle that fire. And you know, we need to take not just the label of emergency, but a real sense of emergency into how we respond to climate, to the climate challenges that we face. And I hope that COVID has maybe increased our ambition about what you can do when there's an emergency, and we can take some of that forward. I know realistically that we also need to balance the need for jobs. And, you know, there will be people saying, well, we haven't got time to care for the planet because jobs are an imperative, but we've got to be more mature than that. We've got to balance the planet and people. Just like during this crisis, we've had to balance the economy and the public health agendas too. It's very simplistic and narrow to think it's either or, and that will not lead to a truly sustainable future. So that's the end of my presentation, and any questions, please feel free to email me. This report on the left it's a report we issued the back end of last year, Local Solutions to the Global Climate Emergency. It's available on our website under the URL that's given there, and I would encourage you to take a look at that. It picks up some of the issues, not from a COVID perspective, I wasn't a forecaster of that, but it picks up some of the issues about how we manage a global problem at a local level. And I'd again like to hear from anyone, any engagements on that. So thank you for the opportunity to share.